Okay, so very good afternoon, everybody, and we are going to discuss today this point on the theme of passion and suffering in the only story. The Only Story by Julian Barnes. And our point of discussion is in thematic study. We'll try to look at theme of love, subsequently which becomes because the very word love divides into passion and suffering. So we will talk also about theme of passion and suffering. We will see some textual quotes as an evidence of how this idea of theme, passion, suffering is growing in the novel. We'll try to give a Lacanian interpretation. Lacanian interpretation to this very idea about desire also, or repression, to understand this theme in this study. So, theme of passion and suffering. Let us see the slides here. One of the reviewers of this novel, that is Alan Prentice Campbell, has very interestingly observed this point in this novel. This point is quite interestingly observed by this reviewer, and that gives us the point to study it in detail also. So it is this is similar to what Amitav Ghosh is doing in etymological study, when he relies on etymological study and then the way he works on the words. So from that, this word is coming, that remember, as you read this small book, generally and specifically about love. Now we know why this word generally, specifically, that is being used here, because that is what comes in the novel. Yesterday we have seen that Samuel Johnson's definition of novel is a small tale generally of love. So the reviewer has used that word, small book, small tale, generally, and then here adds specifically about love. Remember that suffering is, after all, the Latin root for passion. Latin root for passion. So in initial few slides, we will very quickly see this. What is this, the root word for passion, and how that is connected. Passion and suffering are in a way one word, or they share the common meaning. Though when today we see passion, we do not see the word passion in context of suffering. But in passion, which was originally used in terms of suffering, so passion itself is suffering. So when the novel begins with this idea, with this concept, that would you rather love the more and suffer the more? Would you love? So love and suffer. That is how the very first line of the novel begins. Or love less and suffer less. That is ultimately the important question. So that we connect with this idea, with this reviewer has very interestingly observed here. So initially we see etymology of passion. The word passion is one of those words where the modern application appears disconnected from the original meaning. The word itself comes from the Latin root word patio, which means to suffer. So that is the connection with this word. So now when we see the word this also love and other thing, obviously it has both the things there. Love is the passion, but it cannot be isolated without suffering, and that is where philosophically perhaps novelist Julian Barnes wants to explore this idea of love, which is not only passion, but it is always connected with kind of a suffering. It is already there in the etymology also. Its first use in English 1175 AD. Oddly enough, the word is more frequently used in writing than in speech. Many of the modern applications of passion no longer convey the idea of suffering at all. So today, in the modern usage, the word passion and suffering are completely disconnected from each other. Its present use is one describing an intense desire which is often sexual in nature. Passion is normally seen there. Now, even this when we see, we find that, well, that is there in Paul Roberts also. When at the age of 19, he is attracted towards a rather middle-aged woman, Suzanne MacLeod. It is the sexual desire that also is driving him, or a kind of a youthful passion, or a kind of a competition, because that all comes in the novel. He keeps on thinking and says that, well, as if you are in a competition with your classmates and you think that, well, I got somebody to love, I got somebody to sleep with. So that all becomes a kind of a youthful passion where people are in a kind of a competition with each other and they want to win. And that victory also is in terms of love or sexual relation with the other people. So that is how the passion word which we normally see. The modern use also defines passion as being an irrational force that's also irresistible. The older version didn't identify whether the force compelling you to action was rational or irrational, nor did it specify whether it could be resisted. The change in the meaning of the word has increased the power of passion over its original definition. But apart from this, what is important for us is that all these things are a part of Paul's narration. When he looks at a 70-year-old Paul, the old man, when he looks back at his young age, what was the thing about when he was in 19 years of age? It is all this that he keeps on thinking, that were there any choice with you? Or this love was inevitable, this attraction, from where was it coming? Was it really love or what was that? So those things are not very clear, whether it was rational or irrational. All those conflicts are very much in the narration. So this becomes important, whether it was irresistible, whether it was irrational, or it was neither rational nor irrational. It just happened, whatever way it is. But even Paul, at a very old age also, is not able to very clearly see what might have happened. But he tries to define love in different way. Though ultimately at the end he would say that, well, you can't define love also. You have to tell a story to understand love. No definitions can capture the love. The root word carried the idea that a passion was an external force that made you do something or in some way to suffer. So the root word for the passion, it was a kind of an external force that made you do something or in some way to suffer, which obviously becomes quite true in our narration. So this connection is very interestingly observed by Campbell. The modern version of passion is unclear on whether the driving desire originates from inside you or if it is an outside force working on you. So today we don't know whether this desire, which is becoming a passion, or as Lacan, when we will see, Lacan would say that, well, you require a kind of a love object. Otherwise, perhaps you will drive yourself mad. So you require some kind of a love object. And so whether it is driven from inside or outside, but you need to have those drives which you give outlet to in terms of a love object, which may be human beings or a thing or whatever work people do. That all it is becoming necessary. The root of the word also contained applications where the word was used as an intense desire. The root word of passion expresses the idea of being moved to action where there is pain and suffering. So, in the narration, as the way we are told the story of Paul, by Paul, the way we are told, it seems like he is drifted into those things. He is like drifted there. And then he thinks, in one of the another discussion, we will see that there is a metaphor used of a steamer boat, or a log, wooden log. So, steamer boat in a river, Mississippi River example is given in large Mississippi River. So, if a steamer boat, a paddle steamer boat is going, then there is a captain who is controlling it. But if a log is drifted, a wooden log, if it is drifted, then there is no control. So it seems like whether river is controlling the log or can a log control itself. If it is steamer boat, there is a captain who controls the boat. So as an individual, whether we are drifted like a wooden log or we are the captain of our ship, what happens? To what extent we know that we are in the control of our life, or we are just like a wooden log being drifted with the flow of time. Flow of river is a flow of time with which we keep on moving also. So that idea of being moved to action where there is pain and suffering, that is the passion. So passion, even not outside this world also, whenever people are passionate about anything, they in a way are moving towards pain and suffering also. There is lots of pain and suffering. Yesterday I gave you example of recently ended Australian Open. So if you see that both the players who are playing a marathon final match, they undergo lots of pain and suffering. So sometimes you feel that with that kind of richness and money that you have, why do you break your body? Why do you sweat? Why do you break? Why do you undergo pain and suffering? And then one is going to be defeated. So with all those pain and suffering, also there is no guarantee that you are going to win. You are going to be defeated. One is going to be defeated. Both can never win. So even Medvedev, who is defeated, also had struggled a lot. 5-hour long match, 5 hours constantly if you play, and that is also from evening to midnight. Then tremendous exertion on the body. But why do you do that? So passion always drives us towards pain and suffering. And if we don't want pain and suffering, it is better to stay away from passion or not to accept anything passionately in life. For this. Here the matter is about love. Here it is the love. But as we discussed earlier also, we have to go beyond love. That's why Lacan will help us to understand love objects in terms rather than only love as an emotion or a passion that is for any human being only. So in the only story, the passion turns into suffering. The story of youth of 19 years, Paul's passionate attraction towards Susan MacLeod, 48 years old married woman of 2 daughters, is nothing but a story of passion turning into suffering. This is his story of a life-changing, life-defining, passionate love affair. Let me see if the things are coming properly. Yeah. Okay. So it is this life-changing, life-defining, passionate love affair from innocence to experience, from youth to age, from infatuation to weariness. It is the story of suffering for both Paul as well as Susan, along with other family members also. So even if it is Paul's parents or Paul's other girlfriends with whom he might have a relation, they all will suffer because of his relation with Susan. And obviously Susan's daughters who are older than Paul, Susan's husband, they also will suffer. If there is any one character who will understand the things properly, that is John, Joan, the friend of Susan, equally old lady, also a tennis player, but an old lady who might have, who is something like the one who has experienced everything. If you want to see John in a mythical way, then her presence is like Tiresias. The way Tiresias was present in the Westland, and the way he says that he has foreseen everything, he has suffered everything. John is the silent onlooker, silent commenter, who has perhaps undergone all those kinds of suffering. So when a passionate young person would come and talk about something, she again would just laugh on that because she already has seen that what will be the outcome at the end of the day, either in the life of Susan or in the life of Paul also. So John in that way is a very interesting character, and occasionally Paul keeps on visiting, and whenever Paul visits John, actually nothing happens there. It's just a normal talk, and she is playing a kind of a crossword game where she keeps on cheating herself to win. You all alone are playing and you want to win. So obviously you will cheat yourself. You will look answer and then you will do your crossword puzzle. So that is what she is drinking heavily also, all alone. Keep some pets, some dogs and other thing also are the company for her. So John is in that way. But why is he going to meet? What kind of talk is doing? At the end we think that, well, nothing actually happened. Why is he talking about this? But then we see that something might have gone in such a way that Paul is not telling us that. He don't want to tell us. But John might have given a very frank, very bitter comment or observation on what is happening between Susan and Paul also. It is the story of suffering for both this and family members, and then we have to give illustrations to see that how this passion, suffering, or the very idea of love is being coming into the novel. So now we have series of quotes. We have series of quotes in these slides here. The slide link we will put it in our this YouTube description also, because this video will be uploaded on YouTube. So in the description also we will give the link. So in case you may not be able to read everything here, but you can visit that slide and get these quotes. Or if you just find keywords and then go back to the e-text, then also you will get a proper context of entire thing. In case if you are curious to read what is before, what is after this narration or this quote, then also you can just identify keywords and then you can refer to the original text also. This is how we have seen the beginning of the novel. The novel begins with this quote, and we have seen this yesterday also. But time and again we keep on visiting this quote. It's a very interesting beginning. The novel has a very interesting, memorable beginning. We remember some of the very memorable beginnings by Jane Austen in Pride and Prejudice, or by Charles Dickens in Tale of Two Cities. Very famous quotes, paragraphs are given, which people remember. Perhaps this also will go into the same category, where the novel has a very memorable beginning, a quote which can be often used to speak about either love or about suffering, or about passion and suffering. So would you this? We referred to this, and that is the real question is that one. But then you may point out correctly that it isn't really a question. So there is a counter argument that the reader, the speaker, is having with the readers. So he imagines that when readers will read this, they may not agree with me. They will have their own story, and their story of love or passion will not agree with my story of love and passion. So he's adding a few more things there. It isn't a real question because we don't have the choice. If we had the choice, then there would be a question. But we don't, so there isn't. So question. So again, we will, that will give us an answer that, well, I don't have a problem with what you are saying in the beginning, but maybe you were not having a choice perhaps. If there is a choice, then there is a question. Then there is a question, then there is a problem. If there is no choice, then there is nothing as such there. Who can control how much they love? If you can control it, can we control that? And if we can control, then it isn't love. But so how complexity it enters into in this very beginning part. I don't know what you call it instead love, but it is not love if you can control that. So Paul is giving a defense, his own defense, that if you say that it was your mistake, it was your error, you shouldn't have done this, like falling in love with a middle-aged woman is your mistake. But then he says that, well, can you think of all those things when you are in love? You can't. Then if you can think, you are not in love. So that is how you are carried towards suffering. That is how you are drifted like a log, like a wooden log in a Mississippi River, in the river of time, towards your pain and suffering. So the idea of this various quotes that come, and let us very quickly see if something important comes there. Most of what I had read or been taught about love didn't seem to apply, from playground rumor to high-minded literary speculations. And what was that? He thinks of that whatever I have read, different quotes about love that I have got from this quotable lines which people use out of context from great people or great work of art. Quotable lines are there. Some film song lyrics are also there, which are full of very euphoric love sentiments, which also he refers that so many lyrics of film songs are always full of or talking wonderful things about love. So here is one quote that he thinks of. He says that men's love is of men's life a thing apart, it's women's whole existence. As people many times say, that for men, love is just a small episode in the entire life. But for women, it is her entire existence. But then he says that how wrong all these things are. And how gender biased. Why it can't be like, it can be for men also a lifelong affair with love. And for women it can be a third love story. For Suzanne, this is a third love story. First it was Gerald, Gerald, then it was the husband, Gordon, and now it is Paul. So Suzanne's life is three. Now if this quote is right, then Suzanne's life should have only one love story only. But her life has three love stories altogether. But in Paul is unmarried. Even at 70, he is telling that people are asking me that why are you not married? It is a good thing to marry and to have children. That is what people they say. They ask me, but how can I explain that I loved whatever way it went on. I got angry for that. I came into pitiable situation for that. I disliked Susan later on. I left her into a mental asylum. Everything happened, but still I loved her. So here is a story where this gender is topsy-turvy. This knowledge that comes from the other information is not true in the case of Paul. So here it is, in case of women, that is Susan, it is just one episode, and there are already 3 episodes of love in her life. And for men, it is entire existence. એમનું આખું અસ્તિત્વ એની સાથે જોડાયેલું છે. So now this is again that postmodernity, where the writer deliberately challenges traditional knowledge systems or traditional information or knowledge. Whatever we have, they are counter-argued. Counterfactuality is given, that if this is the fact, this is a counterfact. Counterfact is a word repeatedly used in the novel, counterfactual kind of thing. So postmodernity will obviously challenge what is traditionally accepted as some kinds of truths. So if this is the truth, men's love is men's life a thing apart, and women's whole existence, then here it is a different story of Suzanne and Paul there. He said this is wrong, this is very much gender biased, and we might now say, was that the thing? And in his story it becomes quite true also. I was 19 and I knew that love was incorruptible. Well, a young age and the way of looking, love is very, very euphoric, very ideal kind of a thing. And like people in an early phase of the life, they feel that being in love is blissful. Being in love is blissful. Being in love is something great. Those all things which are being glamorized and romanticized by literature and cinema. There are lots of reference to cinema. You will just search the word cinema, you will find a recurrent pattern that keeps on coming about cinema. And then he would say that in cinema, what would happen in a given situation? Cinema will portray the things in this or that way. But in life, does it happen the way it happens in cinema? Perhaps not. Perhaps it doesn't happen in a similar way. So at a very young age, when you look at the life, how it is, and see in the last part as the reference of this cinema or something that is classical literature which glamorizes love in different way. It says, so let me read the last part. This is the novel ends with his last meeting with Suzanne. And when is it happening? Like it is happening 15-20 years before the time when our narrator is telling us a story. So in a timeline we have seen that if he is at 670, then he is telling a story of 15 to 20 years back. So around 50-55 years of age, 50-55 at that time, this last meeting. So Paul is 50-55, 30 years old, so almost 70, 75, 80 years old. Suzanne is in hospital, mental asylum, and she is almost zombified, almost under lots of medication. So she cannot awake. If she awakes, then she would be speaking all rubbish things. As normally we see that zombified or this mental people, they would keep on muttering something. So you give them some injections and medicines, so they keep on constantly sleeping only. So that is the condition of Suzanne in the last time, and that is with that the novel also is ending here. So he is going to meet her there, and says, I went to see her before she died. I went to see her before she died. This was not long ago. At least as time goes in a life, she didn't know that anyone was there, let alone that it might be me. I sat in the chair provided, playing through the scene beforehand. I had hoped that in some way she might recognize me and that she would look peaceful. These hopes were as much for me as for her. I realized that. So even the daughter, one of the daughters, has written a letter and told that you come and meet. Maybe after seeing you, perhaps mother, that is Suzanne, might feel better. She may be at peace with herself if you come. So he is going with that idea that, well, he also will have some kind of peace, because for quite a long time he has not seen Susan. He is almost like handed over. This word handed over. Handed over is something like a material thing. કોઈ વસ્તુ આપણને આપી હોય પછી આપણે એનો ઉપયોગ કરીને પાછી એને પાર્સલ આપી દઈએ. એમ એ બંને દીકરીઓને બોલાવીને કહે છે કે હવે તમારી માતાજીને લઈ જાઓ પાછી. So he is handing over Susan to daughter. Clara is not coming, but Martha is coming, and Martha accepts that. So in that way, Susan is turned into something into this story also, like because she is very much alcoholic. She is suffering from the mental fits, and so for Paul it was unmanageable, and he wanted to have his own career also. So invited one of the daughters, wrote letters to both of them. One came, and then he said, I handed back. So this handing back something, which John obviously satirizes a lot. Says, okay, you have handed back the thing now. He says. So that is how John would satirize on that, how he is dealing this point also. Faces don't change much, not even in extremity. But she didn't look peaceful, even though she was asleep or unconscious. Whichever. So, but obviously she was not sleeping, but she was unconscious under the influence of medication. She was there, but whatever. That is that reference, that carelessness gets reflected in that word. Her forehead was pulled into a frown. There is કરચલી હોય છે અને frown કોઈ ગુસ્સો હોય અને આપણા કપાળમાં જે રીતે કરચલી પડે કોઈ ગુસ્સાની કોઈ ચિંતાની એ પ્રકારનું frown. and her bottom jaw pushed out a little. Bottom jaw, દાંત ભીસી રાખ્યા હોય એ રીતે. I knew these ways her face worked. I had seen them many times when she was in obstinate denial of something, denying it to herself even more than to me. She was breathing through her nose, occasionally giving a small snore. Small snore, એટલે ખરાટા. What we call it? Snoring? Gujarati word? Naskora. Naskora. Now, there is a reference here also that it says that, well, when you read the reference, we find that only men snore. પુરુષોને જ નસકોરા બોલે. પણ આના ભેગા સુતા પછી ખબર પડી કે સ્ત્રીઓ નસકોરા બોલે. અને એવા નસકોરા બોલે કે સુવું અઘરું થાય. ભાઈ એને સૂતી રાખીને તમારે બીજે સુવા જવું પડે. So that all is breaking, is speaking, that snorting sound. She was snoring. Her mouth was clamped tight. I found myself wondering if she still had the same dental plate all these decades on. એમણે દાંતની સર્જરી કરાવેલી હતી એક સમયે. A nurse had brushed her hair, which fell straight down on both sides of her face, almost instinctively. I reached out a hand, planning to uncover for the last time one of her elegant ears. But my hand stopped, seemingly of its own volition. I withdrew it, not knowing if my motive was concern for her privacy or fastidiousness, fear of sentimentality or fear of sudden pain, probably the last. So, well, in those younger days, with a beloved, you will put your fingers in the hair and would put the hair behind the ears. Now here the old lady is lying there in the bed and you wanted to do that. But then something stopped. You withdraw your hand. And then see the thinking that is there. As we have said that this novel is more about philosophical thing rather than actions. There is lots of thinking rather than the actions. એટલે એ હાથ ત્યાં પહોંચતો નથી, પાછો withdraw થઈ જાય છે. And is thinking why that happened. Why that happened? Was it because of her privacy કે એને disturb નથી કરવી એટલે? કે ફાસ્ટિડિયસનેસ છે કોઈ પ્રકારનું, ફિયર ઓફ સેન્ટિમેન્ટાલિટી છે કે ફિયર ઓફ સડન પેઇન છે. પરહેપ્સ ધીસ ઇઝ ધ લાસ્ટ વન. સડન પેઇન ને લીધે કદાચ એને પાછો હાથ ખેંચી લીધો. Susan, I said quietly. She didn't react, except to continue with her frown and the obstinate jut of her jaw. એનું ફ્રોન જે અને જો એ એકદમ ટાઈટ વધુ થાય છે. Well, that was fair enough. કે બરાબર છે, એને ગુસ્સો આવે જ. કદાચ એને અંદર અનકોન્શિયસ સેલ્ફમાં ખબર પડી હોય કે પોલ આવ્યો છે તો એ બહુ ગુસ્સામાં જ હોય કે એટલા વર્ષોથી એમને છોડીને ચાલ્યો ગયો હતો. તો obviously she will be very angry even in her unconscious self. I hadn't come with or for any message, let alone for any forgiveness. From love's absolutism to love's absolution. No, I don't believe in the cozy narrative of life some find necessary, but as I chalk on comforting words like redemption and closure. Death is the only closure I believe in, and the wound will stay open until that final shutting of the doors. So Paul, at a very old age, 70, is very rational, which again perhaps the voice of Julian Barnes comes there. That at the end of this, you are not ready to romanticize anything or glamorize or like show off a sentimentality in such a way that it can give a last succoon to somebody. As that is what the other literature tells us, that when somebody is dying, when the loved one will assemble around, it will give some kind of happiness to that person, and the person will die with some kind of satisfaction in life. So let us give that satisfaction to that person when the person is dying. Well, he says, no, I am not here for that. I don't believe in those sentimentality. And if there are wounds in life, if there are wounds, જખમ જીવનમાં હોય તો એ જખમ મૃત્યુ સાથે જ પૂરા થવા જોઈએ, ત્યાં સુધી રહેવા જોઈએ. Let it be as it is. You don't want to shut the door on the wounds before death. Let death do that. Now that is you can say very crude way of looking at it. It's a very crude way of looking at the very idea about wound, about death, about pain, about suffering here. Uh, as for redemption, it's a far too neat. A movie maker's bromide. Redemption. એટલે છેલ્લે તમે કોઈને redeem કરી દો, કોઈને ગંગા ડૂબકી લગાવી અને પવિત્ર પાવન કરી દો, કોઈને એક થોડો અફસોસ કે પશ્ચાતાપ કરીને પછી કહો કે પશ્ચાતાપ રૂપી ઝરણામાં તમે થોડું સ્નાન કરી લો એટલે તમારા બધા પાપ ધોવાઈ જાય. In all those stupidities, maybe Julian Barnes also is not believing, neither the Paul is believing. He says not all those kinds of things. It is not that redemptions that is easily coming from those literary narratives. He is not for that. Okay? So redemption is far too neat. It is movie maker's bromide. Film વાળાને આવું બધું કરવા દો. ફિલ્મમાં એ બધું સારું લાગે. And beyond that, it feels like something grand which human beings are too imperfect to deserve, much less bestow upon themselves. અને આવી બધી બાબતો માટે આમ જનતા ન હોય. એમાં પછી ભલે પેલો જય અને વીરુ છેલ્લે મરતા મરતા એકબીજાની વાતો કરતા હોય કે this or that, or great people dying in the arms of their friends, like Hamlet dying in arms of Horatio, or Romeo and Juliet, or our this Ram and Leela. Let them die in that way. That is for those grand love stories and all those friendship and other things, not for everybody. It is not for everybody. Everybody's life is not like that you may have that filmy end in the life. That cinematic end in the life is not there for everybody. So that is what he says here. I wondered if I should kiss her goodbye. Another movie maker's bromide. Another movie maker. Chelly kiss, if I make on a forehead or on a cheek, final. Then again he thinks, "Apan pachu pelu cinema ju." Cinema ma avu thai. If you see this film, virus film, Malayali film, virus. So there is a plot. In Kerala there was this Ebola virus and the film. It was before coronavirus. And then the female who is a nurse gets a virus and infected. And our male, the hero, not actually the hero, but the lover of that lady, goes into that chamber. He obviously is going in PPE kit and everything is covered. But inside he removes everything and holds the hand and sleeps nearby. As if inviting a virus, mara sharir ma avi jao, ame banne સાથે જ મરી જઈએ. That is a cinematic thing. આ બધું સિનેમામાં સારું લાગે. સાચા રિયાલિસ્ટિક સાહિત્યમાં આવું ન થાય, આવું કોઈ ન કરે. They allow people to die. We have seen લોકો મરવા દે કે હવે મરો. They will be in their homes. They will not go even to give last agnida or antim sanskar also. That also is done by other people. And thousands of cases we have seen worldwide. That is the reality. So at one or two cases of somebody sacrificing, and only you will glamorize that only. And lot many people are living that more realistic, very crude life of pain and suffering. What about that? So Julian Barnes tells this, that this is that reality of life that literature has to deal. Obviously this all also becomes somewhere a part of the literature which is not a traditional literature, that is where a very hardcore reality gets reflected in the narrative also. So he says last kiss, that also is movie maker's bromide, and no doubt in that film she would stir slightly in response, her frown lines increase and her jaw relax. A film hoy to એમાં એવું જ થાય, પછી ક્લોઝ અપ આવે, એમણે ફોરહેડ ઉપર કિસ કર્યો હોય, હાથમાં હાથ લીધો હોય, એટલે પછી ક્લોઝ અપમાં ફ્રોન રિલેક્સ થતા બતાવે, એનો જો લાઈન થોડી રિલેક્સ થતી બતાવે, અને ચહેરા ઉપર એકદમ સુકૂન આવતું હોય તેવું બતાવે. પછી એકદમ સુરીલું મ્યુઝિક ચાલે કે એક શાંત અવસ્થા જાણે ઉતરી રહી છે એના મનમાં. આવું બધું એ સિનેમામાં થાય, એ ફિલ્મમાં આવું બતાવે, આ દ્રશ્ય આવું હોય તો. And then I would indeed lift back her hair and whisper into her delicately helixed ear of final goodbye Suzanne. આવું પેલી ફિલ્મમાં થાય. પછી ધીરેથી હું એના કાન પાસે જાઉં અને ધીરેથી બોલું goodbye Suzanne. At which she would stir slightly and offer the trace of a smile. પછી ફિલ્મમાં શું થાય, થોડી હલનચલન થાય, થોડા હોઠ હલે, થોડી સ્માઇલ આવે. Then with the tears unwiped from my cheeks, I would rise slowly and leave her. પછી મારી આંખોમાંથી અશ્રુ જતા હોય, પછી ધીરેથી ઊભો થઈ અને હું બહાર નીકળું અને એ ત્યાં મરે. આ રીતે ફિલ્મમાં બતાવવામાં આવે કે કઈ રીતે બે પ્રેમીઓ છૂટા પડી રહ્યા છે. પેલી મરતા સમયે થોડી સુખ વ્યક્ત કરે છે, આનંદ થાય છે કે અલ્ટિમેટલી પ્રેમી આવી જાય છે. જે પ્રેમીનું પેલું ગીત એક ફિલ્મમાં ગવાયું હતું કે કૌવાએ is telling to crow, what is that lines? Requesting to crow that don't eat my eyes. चुन चुन खाइयो मांस. Don't eat my eyes because Pia Milan Kias. Eat my entire body, but not the eyes. She will come and I will see her. Let my eyes see her. That is that cinema. Movie makers bromide. Films are all about this, and they sing songs of all those things. That is what Julian Barnes is bringing here. That film will do all this thing, and then this way the lovers will depart. Ultimately, when she will be dying happily and with the tears in his eyes, he will move on in different directions. And we love to watch this. આ પ્રકારની sentimentality જોવી બહુ જ ગમે. એટલે જ વારંવાર આપણી એકતા કપૂરની સિરિયલમાં આવ્યા જ કરે. પેલી ડોસીમાં અક્ષરા જે અત્યારે જીવતી હોત તો દાદીમાં હોત. હવે એની પ્રોત્રી પણ એ જ જીવન જીવે છે. એ પણ પાછું કોઈ સાથે પ્રેમ થાય ને પછી થોડી ખેંચા ખેંચી થાય અને પછી આમ મોઢું ફેરવીને આંખમાં આંસુ બતાવવામાં આવે આપણે ને ખોટા ખોટા રડતા હોય ને સેન્ટિમેન્ટ કેવી મજા આવે. એમ થાય કે આ 20 વર્ષ પહેલા આ જ જોતા હતા. ત્યારે કદાચ હજી થોડા યુવાન હતા એટલે મજા આવે, હજી મજા આવે આમાં. હવે કેમ મજા આવે? But then the same story, the same sentimentality, the same kind of thing that repeatedly keeps on going. Julian Barnes puts a narrative against all those way of dealing with emotion, or rather in a different way, that love is what? It is this pain. It is pain and suffering. It is a passion which leads you towards pain and suffering there. And then આ રીતે ફિલ્મ હોય તો આ રીતે દ્રશ્ય રચાય એ જગ્યાએ. This is last paragraph. તો છેલ્લો પેરેગ્રાફ શરૂ થાય છે, none of this happened. None of this happened. આવું કશું જ અહીંયા થતું નથી. None of this happened. I looked at her profile and thought back to some moments from my own private cinema. And then I looked at some moments in my own private cinema. And that is our memory. What is our private cinema? It is our memory. The film that we have made of our memories, our events. We do selection of events from the life. And then we store them in our memory in a particular way. As if it is a cinema, as if it is a story, as if it is a kind of a TV series. And we put those things. So he says that I withdrew myself and went back into my private cinema. Suzanne in her green wiped tennis dress, feeding her racket into its press. અને પછી એ સિનેમામાંથી કયા દ્રશ્યો આવે છે? તો કે when he was 19 years old. પહેલી વખત જ્યારે ટેનિસ મેચ રમવા માટે અમે ક્લબમાં ભેગા થયા ત્યારે સુઝાન કેવી લાગતી હતી, એનો ડ્રેસ કેવો હતો, what was she doing with the tennis racket and was pressing the things and other things there. So that is what comes from the private cinema. The old images that starts flowing in different way also. So that is how this one is using this idea about cinema. That cinematic way of looking at what happens in cinema, and that is very interestingly used by Julian Barnes here. So when he says that in a younger days he is uncorruptible and all those things, and then he tries to look at love. I haven't been in love before, so I don't understand about love. What I am worried about is that if you love me, it will leave you less for the other people you love. This is the talk between Suzanne and Paul. That, well, it means like if one person loves another one, then that person is not available for other people. So that is what he thought, I think, is love. Well, but so he says, I don't name them, I mean her daughters and perhaps even her husband. See? Now see this line, when he says, that is Paul, says, when he talks that love, I think, is this, he's talking about when he was a younger person. Now he's an old person of 70 years and he tries to remember exactly then what I was thinking. That when you love somebody, then you are not available for other people. Now, when you think you're not available for other people, who were those people in my mind? Was he like any other lovers in the life of Susan? No, you would never imagine that. You would never imagine when you are in love that your partner also might have a love with some other people also. And all they share the love with each other. That one never imagines. But who are those people? That may be daughters and husbands. તો એ પ્રેમમાં વાંધો નહીં. એટલે થોડો થોડો પ્રેમ મમ્મી પપ્પાને, થોડો ભાઈ બહેનને ને થોડો મને પણ, એમ વાંધો નહીં. પણ મમ્મી પપ્પાની જગ્યાએ બીજો કોઈ પાર્ટનર હોય, ભાઈ બહેનની જગ્યાએ બીજો પાર્ટનર હોય, થોડો મને તો એમ નહીં. So how we look at love and how that sharing of the love with an individual, how it goes on in that way. But we never imagine that you can share love in different propensity with other people, but the relation should be different. It can never be the same relation. It can never be. So that's why he says, I meant her daughters and perhaps even her husband. Perhaps even her husband also. It's not like that, Susan says. Susan કે એવું ન હોય. Susan is an old lady. એની મેચ્યુરિટી વધુ છે. એ કંઈ 17-18 વર્ષની નથી. So it's not like that. She answered at once as if it is something she too has thought about and has solved also perhaps. Love's elastic. He says love is very much elastic. It's not a question of watering down. It adds on. It doesn't take away. So there is no need to worry about that. So watering down means કે એક લોટામાં જેટલું પાણી હોય તમે 3 ગ્લાસમાં નાખો પછી લોટો ખાલી થઈ જાય. તો કે એવું પ્રેમમાં ન હોય. પ્રેમમાં જેમ તમે વધુ પ્રેમ આપો એમ પ્રેમ વધુ ભરાય. એમ ખાલી ન થાય લોટો. લોટો ભરાય વધુ. So love is elastic. And the more you use, the more it increases. આપણે તો આ વસ્તુ હંમેશા જ્ઞાનમાં જ જોઈ હતી. લોકોએ આપણને કીધું સંપત્તિ હોય અને જ્ઞાન હોય તો કે સંપત્તિ જેમ વેચો એમ ઓછી થાય અને જ્ઞાન જેમ વેચો એમ વધે. પણ પ્રેમ પણ વેચો એમ વધે. આ નવી વ્યાખ્યા આવી. Susan is stating that love is not like that you water it down, it gets less. No, it increases, it grows more. Well, but the problem is there that if it is like with family members, it is fine. But if it is with the other lovers, then with other beloveds, and then you say કે 4-5 ને પ્રેમ કરીએ તો પ્રેમ વધે. એટલે હું પ્રેમ વધારવા માટે 4-5 સાથે પ્રેમ, આપણે કે એને પ્રેમ ન કહેવાય, એને અફેર કહેવાય. You can't call it love with everybody. You call it affairs. અને પછી લોકલ ભાષામાં આપણે બધા ચેપ્ટર કહીએ કે આનું ચેપ્ટર, પેલાનું ચેપ્ટર. But you never use the word love for those things. So, but why don't we use that word for that way? Why we don't have a more comprehensive way of looking at love? If we think that love is something that makes us better human beings, then why we become selfish also? Why we become selfish? So that is how that pondering upon love, this novel would take us on that journey. Love was by its very nature disruptive, cataclysmic, and if it was not, then it was not love. You might ask how deep my understanding of love was at the age of 19. A court of law might find it based on a few books and films, conversations with friends, heady dreams, aching fantasies about certain girls on bicycles, and a quarter relationship with the first women I went to bed with. But my 19-year-old self would correct the court. Understanding love is for later. Understanding love verges on practicality. Understanding love, and this understanding is inverted comma. So we say that love is not about understanding. Is for when the heart has cooled. The lover in rapture doesn't want to understand love, but to experience it, to feel the intensity, the coming into focus of things, the acceleration of life, the entirely justifiable egotism, the lustful cockiness, the joyful rant, the calm seriousness, the hot yearning, the certainty, the simplicity, the complexity, the truth of love. So see this, the flow of thought. મનમાં વિચારો ચાલી રહ્યા છે, એ આખા વિચારોની જેમ લખાયું છે. That style of writing. You say, so well, at that age, at much younger age, you are not there to understand love. You just want to feel love. But when you look back at the age of 70, when you look back 50 years down the line, then you are trying to understand everything. That what were you doing? What kind of person you were? What were your choices? what were your answers of the questions that you had? Old man is looking back, and then he is counter arguing with his younger self that then it was a different story. Now, obviously, it is a different story. But in all this debate, this very idea of love is growing. It is being explored here. Then this point of liars comes here. Liars, jhutha bola. And as we know that we are reading a novel which is also about postmodernism, and there is this unreliable narrator. So, well, our narrator itself is a liar also. So we are very conscious about that though our narrator is talking about lies and liars, but we are aware that, well, he himself also is to be taken very carefully, because he may also be lying with us so many things. We have seen yesterday that one says that I never wrote a diary, and then I said that I wrote. I never did this, then said I did. So many things we have seen yesterday, that how he keeps on shifting from. So here it is alcoholics and lovers. There is this point of alcoholics and lovers. Now again, the traditional knowledge will tell that alcoholics are truth sayers. Alcoholics never lie. That perhaps many people will say. કે લોકો નશામાં હોય ત્યારે જે બોલે સાચું જ બોલે. એટલે સાચું બોલાવવા માટે ફિલ્મમાં ઘણી વખત આપણા હીરો કે હિરોઈનને દારૂ પીવડાવવામાં આવતો હોય છે, પ્લોટના ભાગરૂપે. પછી એ પીને પછી સાચું જ બોલે. એટલે આ વિભાવના આવી ક્યાંથી કે દારૂડિયાઓ સાચું બોલે, અથવા દારૂના નશામાં લોકો ખોટું ન બોલે. If you know that when people are intoxicated by liquor, they will speak truth, then you will speak a lie after being intoxicated. તમને એકવાર ખબર છે કે બધા આવું કરે, તો તમને ખબર છે કે બધા મને એમ સાચા તરીકે લેશે, તમે ખોટું બોલો. You have a control over yourself, that when you are intoxicated, you know the other people will take you as somebody speaking truth, but you may speak a lie also. The other point also, which is not in a way connected here, but as people say that when people are on the verge of death, they never speak lie. એ પણ પાછું એક બીજું સિનેમેટિક અસત્ય છે. આ બધા સિનેમાથી આવેલા અસત્યો, જે આ નોવેલ આપણને એ તરફ લઈ જાય કે આ બધું સિનેમામાં થાય, વાસ્તવિક દુનિયામાં એવું ન હોય. So એ અસત્યો કે last words or dying declaration, which even legal provisions are making it true. But if I know that dying declarations are taken as truth, I may lie when I am dying. I may put somebody in fix. આખું જીવન મને હેરાન કર્યા, હવે છેલ્લે તમને હેરાન કરતો જાવ. પછી nobody is going to come to ask you that what is happened there. So પછી આત્મા જ્યાં ભટકે ત્યાં ભટકે, આપણે પછી એની ક્યાં ચિંતા. But you may. So if you know, then you don't know how you will behave. When you don't know, things are different. But if you know, then you may obviously control lot many things also there. Okay? So it says alcoholics are liars. All alcoholics are liars. That is what it says, rather going against that traditional way of looking at alcoholics. This was obviously not based on a huge sample or broad research. Now this again is very interesting to see. કે આપણો પ્રોટેગોનિસ્ટ પાછો આ પણ વિચારે કે હું જે વિચારું છું એ કોઈ રિસર્ચના ભાગરૂપે નથી આવ્યું. આપણે તો રિસર્ચ કરતા હોય તો એમાં આવું ન લખીએ કે રિસર્ચમાંથી આવ્યું છે કે એઝમ્પશનમાંથી આવ્યું છે. We are doing research, and once research becomes a part of our life, everything we will think in this language. And so whatever we will say, we will just put that pinch of salt that this I think is there, but I don't know whether it is completely true. I think I have read here, and so person is telling all this thing. So it may be true, but it may be wrong also. So that is that honesty with self, which our unreliable narrator has. Or at least when he is just talking with self, he is trying to reflect that honesty. That, well, this I know, but well, it is coming from a limited data, not based on huge sample, on broad research, but I believed it at the time, and now decades later, with more field experience, I believe it to be an essential truth about the condition. ત્યારે ઓછી રીતે, હવે એટલા અનુભવ પછી વધુ સારી રીતે માનું છું કે આ દારૂડિયાઓ હોય એ ખોટા હોય. That is what he says. I believe now. I went on. All lovers are truth tellers. I used to believe that lovers are always truth tellers. Again, the sample was small, consisting mainly of myself only. હું એકલો જ હતો એ સેમ્પલમાં કે હું પ્રેમી છું ને હું સાચું બોલું છું. અને આ સુઝાન દારૂ પીવે છે એટલે ખોટું બોલે છે. હું સાચો પ્રેમી અને એ ખોટી પ્રેમી. Very easy calculations. 1 plus 1 is doing. So this, that the lovers are always truth tellers. Obviously we may say that well, lovers will have to tell lot many lies than anybody else. એને તો ડગલે ને પગલે ખોટું બોલવું પડે. સવારમાં વહેલા ઉઠીને ટ્યુશન ક્લાસમાં જવાથી લઈ અને સાંજ સુધી શું કરે છે બધામાં કેટલા ખોટા બોલવા પડે. So lovers are truth tellers. The sample is only himself. It is himself only. It seemed to me evident that love and truth were connected. Indeed, as I may have said, that to live in love is to live in truth. And then the conclusion to this quasi-syllogism, therefore, the alcoholic is the opposite of the lover. Alcoholic is the opposite of the lover. This seemed not just logical, but also consistent with my observations. Now, well, we might have seen in many films or many narrations that when people fall out of love, what they do is that they become drunkards. That we have seen many a times. That people who fall out of love, and in the next scene where you will see the hero, normally heroine will be wailing in the bedroom. Heroine કાળા કપડા પહેરીને બેડરૂમમાં ગીત ગાતી હોય બારી બાર ચાંદને જોઈને અને હીરો ક્યાંક પબમાં જઈને દારૂ પીતો હોય. આવા નોર્મલ દ્રશ્યો આપણે હજારો ફિલ્મોમાંથી મળી શકે when there is a breakup or a kind of a thing that people see. But well, alcoholism and love might have some connection as such that they are going together. But here the writer is connecting with who is truth sayer, who speaks truth, alcoholic or the lover there. So he says that alcoholic are the opposite of the lovers. So either you can be alcoholic or you can be a lover. You can't be both. Once you start moving towards alcoholism, it means you are moving away from your love. Now this is what he thinks, and when it really happens, it is very shocking to Paul. It is very shocking to Paul. So when he realizes that, I think in the next slide we will have that. Here comes the paradox, one that initial struggle with the love. Yeah. Yes. If you love her and you unwaveringly do, and if loving her means understanding her, then understanding her must include understanding why she is a drinker, why she becomes alcoholic. And not only alcoholic, Susan becomes alcoholic, but she becomes a liar also. So one day his friend suddenly comes and tells that I have hidden the bottle of liquor, and then I am surprised to see that somebody is drinking from that liquor. The bottle that is hidden. The bottle. Now, obviously, we are talking about a society where drinking is not prohibited. And even if you drink, it is not a problematic even from the angle of morality or other thing. We're talking about London, England. So it's not Gujarat where there is a dry state. And here you have to hide bottles to drink. And because you are afraid that police may raid your places and you may be caught. It's not Gujarat, it's London. But still, in a decent families, they drink on weekends. They drink on, or there is a discipline in drinking. You may drink at night a peg or a two, and you will go to bed. So you won't be drinking throughout. Early in the morning, you will not just take the very first peg before even brushing your teeth. And then throughout the day, you don't keep a thermos ready of liquor or wine or brandy and keep on drinking. It is not like that. So weekends, when the gatherings are there, then people would drink with a decent way. But then some people are there who may have the habit of drinking, so they may hide some bottles that whenever you want you can take, because people will obviously object that why are you drinking unnecessarily without occasion, why do you keep on drinking? Well, we know that in our society, even if you keep on unnecessarily drinking Pepsi or Coca-Cola, then also people will say કે આ શું પેપ્સી કોકાકોલા આખો દિવસ પીધા કરો છો. તો દારૂમાં તો કે આપણે પેપ્સી કોકાકોલા કોઈ શાંતિથી ન પીવા, જેમ કે બટર મિલ્ક પીવો, આપણું છાશ પીવો, દેશી પીણું, વાય આર યુ ડ્રિંકિંગ ધીસ, એટલે બે ત્રણ વખત લોકો તમને જો સલાહ આપ્યા વગર ન જ જાય. They obviously will give you an advice on that. So obviously for liquor, even in a free places, people will, because it obviously is damaging liver and the part of a body. So required suggestions are given. So some people who want to drink, they will hide bottles in their homes. So that is how I think Eric is hiding. and then realize that, well, the bottle is getting reduced suddenly. So what? So Paul is asking. So maybe he says that you might have drunk and then you have forgotten. જેમ તમે બે ત્રણ ઘૂંટડા પી લીધા પછી થોડું માપ રહીએ કાંઈ કે ક્યાં કેટલી બોટલમાં ક્યાં સુધી હતું ભરેલું, એ થોડું ઉપર નીચે તો દેખાય કે પી ગયા હોય ત્યારે. તો how? But he told no, exactly I remember when I first had a doubt કે આમાં દારૂ ઓછો થઈ રહ્યો છે, પછી મેં માર્ક કરવાનું શરૂ કર્યું કે અહીંયા સુધી છે, આમાંથી ઓછો થાય તો કોઈ પીવે છે. Then I realized that it is. And then when they came to know, it was Susan who was drinking. It was Susan. છુપી રીતે એ બોટલ લઈ અને એ પી, અને when they were asking, she was telling that no, she is not drinking. So it's a double problem. It's a double problem. One, you are alcoholic, and second, you are lying also. Now, according to your equation, the alcoholics are liars and the lovers are truth sayer. Now, if Suzanne is alcoholic and lying, she is not a lover. So then you are stranded that I am a lover, but my partner is not a lover. So Paul will have a problem in understanding that relation. And then again, that she was not doing that when she was perhaps with Gerald or even with Gordon. Even with Gordon, where he had not a very happy married life, yet she was not alcoholic and not a liar then, but with him she is. So he may say that there must be problem with me now then. Perhaps I am worse than Gordon also. Forget about Gerald, whom you don't know, but you may be worse than Gordon also. So says that you run through all her prehistory and recent history and current situation and possible future. You are studying her thoroughly. You understand all this, and before you know where you are, you have passed somehow from total denial of the fact that she drinks to total comprehension of why she might do so. Not only she is doing, but why she is doing that. But with this comes a brute chronological fact. With this comes a brute chronological fact. As far as you know, Suzanne only drank occasionally in all her years with MacLeod. But now that she is living with you, she is still becoming an alcoholic. There is too much in this for you to entirely acknowledge, let alone bear. So this is again that love, how it is growing and how things happen in between, where you are not able to comprehend what things are going on there. All your equations are falling apart. Your understanding of life is falling apart. The way you thought that this is the equation of life, it is falling apart in your life here. What a long way you have come years ago when you started off lying to your parents. So now, so this is that. Now you have a lover, and for that love you have challenged society, you have challenged your parents, you have challenged the traditional norms. You are banished from tennis club. Because of that affair, you are the villain in a society. People do not like you. So later on he says that if I go back to my village, that is the suburb in London, then how would they see today? Obviously they may still hate me, that this was that Nalayak who ran away with an old lady who was having 2 young daughters. That way, or he thinks that maybe the time has changed. Now more of people are doing like this. So maybe the society has grown to accept me, but that is still going as a debate in this narration. It happens there. So when that happens, obviously it is taken in a very bad manner. It is like 60s, 70s in England. So it's not like 21st century where people may accept such a kind of elopement or such a kind of a relation. And Susan has not divorced MacLeod. She has not divorced, and without a divorce, she is staying with Paul in London. They hire a room, and Paul is like fakir, Jolawala fakir. So he don't have any money. So it is Susan's money from where things are also happening. He still has to settle in life. So he is still not earning that income. That's why he has to live ultimately for some livelihood and other things. So it is her income, her money from where the things are going on. And she is already still married. He tries to see that you give divorce, but she is not ready to give divorce. Maybe Susan is more matured. We don't know what is going in the mind of Susan, but we can imagine all those gaps there, and we can say that, well, she is around 50, 55 by that relation which is going for almost 10 years. And she may realize that, well, if you will divorce Gordon, then you will be all on the road, and you don't know whether this young man, this Jolawala Fakir, will do anything in life or not. And if he will not do anything, then you have to have that plan B ready to go home again. You can still say sorry to somebody and go back. But if you leave everything, then what will happen also? So that's it. So, but Paul has left everything. He challenged parents and all those things, and he is now there. And then that shocker comes, that you were lying with your parents and you thought that, well, lying is great thing. પહેલી વખત માતા પિતા સામે ખોટું બોલ્યા હોય ને ન પકડાયા હોય એટલે એક આમ જીતનો નશો હોય. મિત્રોને કહેતા હોય કે આજે તો ઉલ્લુ બનાવ્યા કે મમ્મી પપ્પાને એને આનંદ આવે. There is always a time of going into teenage where we drift away from parents towards our friends. And at that time, people also like to abuse their parents and talk about that with their friends also, which Julian Barnes, many characters do. Julian Barnes characters in Sense of an Ending also are doing that. Here also, Paul do not have that sense of respect for parents. He is not displaying that respect. In earlier novel, the protagonist, our Webster, in Sense of an Ending, would say that if there is a great literature written, then where would be my parents or our parents? Like there are 3-4 friends there. He says our parents will be like a chorus, bystanders. એ ક્યાંક રોડ ને કાંઠે બેઠા હોય જ્યારે હીરો પસાર થતો હોય ત્યારે આપણા પેરેન્ટ્સ ને એવું કાંઈ નથી કે હીરો બની શકે અથવા એના ઉપર કોઈ સારું સાહિત્ય લખાઈ શકે. એ પ્રકારના આપણા પેરેન્ટ્સ છે, completely middle class people. They don't have any kind of heroism on which a literature can be written. So that is that way Paul also looks at his parents also, and lying. But when you keep on lying with other people, you feel there is a kind of an heroism, and you feel that you are doing something great. And when somebody start doing with you that, then when somebody like for whom you were doing all those things, if that person also starts lying with you, now then it is a shocker. Then it is very difficult to sustain. And then you obviously look back at all those things, that how would other people felt when you were lying with those people also. So it says that years ago when you started off lying to your parents, you did so with a kind of relish, reckless of consequence. It almost felt character building. Later, you begin to tell lies in all directions to protect her and to protect your love. Later still, she starts lying to you to keep you from knowing her secret. And now she lies with a kind of relish, reckless of consequence. Then finally, you begin lying to her. Why? Something to do with the need to create some internal space which you could keep intact and where you could yourself remain intact. And this is how it is for you now. Love and truth. The question of love and truth. Later on there will be discussion about love and duty also. So here, love and truth. Where have they gone? You ask yourself, is staying with her an act of courage on your part or an act of cowardice? Perhaps both, or it is just an inevitability. Means it is like you have to leave now. There is no way out. Now you are a log, you are a wooden log who is drifted now. So is it your courage and by your willingness you are staying? Are you the captain of your ship and then you are still controlling yourself? Or are you a coward so you can't say anything and so you are staying with that situation? Or you are just a log who is drifted now and there is no way of doing the thing. It is inevitable now that you have to sustain the things there. So this is where this lies, that when you get the lies from other people, then you lie to keep something secret, and that secret means you want to remain intact. તમારે કંઈક અંદર તમારું સ્વ બચાવી રાખવું છે એટલે તમે ખોટું બોલો છો. ખોટું બોલવા પાછળનું કારણ કે અંદરનું કંઈક છે તે તમારે ઇન્ટેક્ટ રાખવું છે, એને તૂટવા નથી દેવું, એટલે તમે બીજા લોકો સાથે ખોટું બોલો છો. So a very interesting philosophical talk on lies and why people lie, and again with truth and lie, but his initial understanding, alcoholics are like this and lovers are like this. Alcoholics are liars and the lovers are truth speakers. That all is going wrong and it is broken also. you realize that that tough love is also tough on the lover. There is a separate quote that comes there. Somewhere in some novel he subsequently read, he had come across the sentence, he fell in love like a man committing suicide. Many literature we read that people fall in such a kind of a love. And if you remember, this classical mythical love is always that you are as if you are Leibstod. Leibstod, the archetype of Leibstod, the lover who is ready to greet death for the sake of love. પ્રેમ માટે એ મૃત્યુને પણ ભેટવા માટે તૈયાર હોય એને લેઇબસ્ટોડનું આર્કિટાઇપ્સ કહેવાય છે. In north of Fry we have seen that, and the connection, the example was Hamlet. Hamlet, who Ophelia's dead body was there in the grave, and then he jumps and then fights with the brother of Ophelia, Laertes, almost near death. And then we have seen that, well, we have lots of narration about Leibstod, where people fall in love and they are ready to die for that. Not only Romeo Juliet or Heer Ranza Sohni Mahiwal kind of narration, that obviously is going in that, but even in another one where the love becomes motherland, and then people are ready to die for motherland. Matrubhumi mate પણ બલિદાન આપવા તૈયાર થતા હોય, and all those stories also becomes Leibstod in different way that we can see. And in T.S. Eliot's The Westland we have seen that the myth of Tristan and Isolde. Isolde and Tristan myth, do you remember that myth? The Westland. In the Westland there are lots of myths. One myth was of Tristan and Isolde, where the hyacinth flowers are growing, that reference. So that also is the thing where the love leads towards death of both the lovers. Love leads to that. So this idea that when people fall in love, it is like committing suicide. There is obviously a death standing there in that. It wasn't quite like that, but there was a sense in which he had no choice. He had no choice here. He couldn't live with Susan. He couldn't establish a separate life away from her. So now that love has become such a kind of a thing that you can't live with her, you can't stay away from her. Therefore, he went back to live with her. Courage or cowardice or mere inevitability, whatever you call it. But then that is how you are held up now in the love. And then it is very difficult to stay away from that or there. And then you sustain, you keep on living. And then, now, if you continue living and things go on okay, then someday after some years somebody will be celebrating 25th anniversary of togetherness or 50th anniversary. But એ પાછળ જોઈએ તો કે બસ ટકી ગયા, પેલા લાકડે ટીંગાઈ ગયા હોય એમ બસ ટકી ગયા એમાં અહીંયા પહોંચી ગયા. નહીં તો કેટલા એવા પ્રસંગ આવ્યા હોય કે હવે આ બધું જુદું પડી જશે. તો પછી બીજો વિકલ્પ જ નહોતો, જવું ક્યાં કે. એટલે પછી સાથે ને સાથે પડ્યા રહ્યા તો પછી કોઈ પછી 50મી એનિવર્સરી ઉજવી. એ લોકો પાછળ જુએ તો કદાચ પોલ જેવું જ દેખાય. 70 વર્ષે એક ડોસો પાછળ જુએ તો જુએ કે how this all the relations that was drifting apart. An entry from his notebook which had survived, that is his diary, which has survived several inspections. In love everything is both true and false. It's the one subject on which it's impossible to say anything absurd. That's why people would come that in love and war everything is fair. Everything is fair in love and war. So here these things are beyond true or false. Now see how he began. He began that alcoholics are liars and the lovers are truth speakers. Now you are growing into your love and you understand the love and the experience that says that, well, in love everything is fair. It is beyond all this moral code of conducts of society. It is beyond what is true and what is false there. Then there is this all full paragraph on love and duty also. So again this he refers again. Postmodernity has very interesting idea of intertextuality. So they keep on referring to other literatures, like they refer that if this is in cinema it will be like this, if this is in a myth it will be like this, it will be in classical literature it will be like this, but here it is not like that. Here it is like this. This is not a classical literature, this is not a myth, this is not a cinema. So here things are much different than what we imagine. So that is that intertextuality. Writer constantly reminds us that આજ ઘટના, આજ પ્રસંગ કોઈ મિથમાં કે લેજન્ડમાં હોય તો એ જુદી રીતે આખો ભજવાય. કોઈ સિનેમામાં હોય તો જુદું થાય, અહીંયા આવું કશું થવાનું નથી. This is more real to one's life. He remembered at school being guided by masters through books and plays in which there was often a conflict between love and duty. So he remembers કે આવી અનેક વાર્તાઓ સ્કૂલથી આવતી હોય કે જ્યારે લવ અને ડ્યુટી વચ્ચે કોન્ફ્લિક્ટ થાય ત્યારે લોકોએ કઈ રીતે ડ્યુટીનો પક્ષ લેતા હોય છે અને પોતાના પ્રેમનું બલિદાન આપતા હોય છે. ફરજ બહુ મહત્વની છે. એક બાજુ પ્રેમ હોય, એક બાજુ ફરજ હોય, ત્યારે એ ફરજ અથવા એ જ એમના ધર્મ તરીકે સ્વીકારતા હોય. And they are more towards the duty rather than love. That's all stories that people have seen. In those old stories, innocent but passionate love would run up against the duty owed to family, church, king or state. એ ડ્યુટી કોઈના પણ પ્રત્યે હોય, ફેમિલી માટે હોય, કોઈ ફેમિલી માટે પ્રેમીને છોડી દે, કોઈ ધર્મ માટે છોડી દે, કોઈ રાજા માટે છોડી દે, કોઈ રાજ્ય માટે છોડી દે. In different way. Tristan and Isolde's story will be about king and state. The brave warrior Tristan, એમના કાકા રાજા છે, and he is going to fight neighboring country ને જરૂર પડી છે એટલે આ સૈન્ય લઈને જાય છે લડવા, જીતે છે, ઇજાગ્રસ્ત થાય છે, પછી એ રાજાની દીકરી હતી એ એમની સંભાળ રાખે છે અને એને સારું થઈ જાય છે અને એમાં બંનેને પ્રેમ થઈ જાય છે. They both fall in love with each other. And then પણ થાય છે એવું કે પેલા પિતાજી એની દીકરીના લગ્ન પેલા રાજા સાથે કરાવે છે કે તમે અમને મદદ કરી એટલે હું મારી ડોટરના લગ્ન, એટલે એ તો ઘરે આવતા તો કાકી બનીને આવે છે, જેમને પત્ની બનીને આવવાનું હતું એ તો કાકી બનીને આવે છે. અને એ પ્રેસ્ટન તો કઈ બાહુબલી નથી કે મમ્મી સામે લડી લે કે નહીં, એમ તમે કહો કે આ પેલો ભલાલ દેવ લગ્ન કરે એમ ન ચાલે, લગ્ન તો હું જ કરીશ કે એ તો મિસઅન્ડરસ્ટેન્ડિંગ થઈ હતી. મિસઅન્ડરસ્ટેન્ડિંગમાં થોડું કઈ ચોકલેટની જેમ 5 ભાગ પાડવાના હોય. Gone are those days. Those days are gone કે લોકો કે ભાગ પાડી લો તો ચલો પાંચે ભાગ પાડી લીધા. Those are classical legends. Reality doesn't happen. So that is how you think of that duty and love. Some protagonists won, some lost, some did both at the same time. Usually tragedy ensued. મોટે ભાગે tragedy જ આમાંથી બહાર આવતી હોય. No doubt in religious, patriarchal, hierarchical societies, such conflicts continued and still gave the themes to writers. હજી પણ આવી વાર્તાઓ ચાલે છે અને એ કયા સમાજમાં? રિલિજિયસ સમાજમાં, patriarchal, hierarchical society, they still believe in those stories. Postmodernity is about writing against meta-narratives. It challenges meta-narration. So there is a deliberate attempt very clearly here that you can tell stories in this way also. Julian Barnes is aware that I can tell a love story in this manner also. But I don't believe in that religious, patriarchal, hierarchical societies. So I don't want to tell stories the way people tell stories in that world. I want to challenge those narrations. I want to be more realistic about the kind of a thing that this kind of thing doesn't happen to everybody. These are rare things. And when those things are happening also, what is undergoing behind the scenes that people are not aware about. That also people are not aware. Lots of the real life is covered behind rhetorics and metaphors. Behind rhetorics and metaphors of great literature, the real human sentiments are hidden, that people never get to see also. So here you want to see that. But in the village, no church going for his family, no much of a hierarchical social structure, unless you counted the tennis and golf club committees with their power to expel. So realistically he says that, well, we don't belong to the families. They go to church every Sunday, so they are not religious people. They don't believe in social hierarchical structures, except if you think that, well, tennis and golf is played by the higher society. It is not the games which are played by everybody as such. More sophisticated game which rich people normally play. With the power, not much patriarchy either, not with his mother around. As for family duty, he had felt no obligation to placate his parents. Indeed, nowadays the onus shifted and it was the parents' job to accept whatever life choices their child might make. Like running off to a Greek island with a Pedro and hairdresser and bringing home that Jim slip mother to be, yet this liberation from those dogmas and the kind of. So he said time has changed. Now our life is not like that, which used to happen in all these societies. Things have changed deliberately there. So no need to talk about love and duty in that sense as such. In his youth, hot with pride at his love for Susan, he had been competitive as all young men are. So that is what we referred earlier, that he looks at Susan's relation with Susan as like winning some competition. Earlier, I think we referred that obviously women are seen as some kind of trophies, as some kind of trophies in the patriarchal narration, that when you get a woman, it is like a trophy that you have won. So that way, in that young days competition with other people, he thinks like he got into relation with somebody. He got somebody to love, and he is as if like a victorious person as compared to other friends. And by that time, he had made the most terrifying discovery of his life, one which probably cast a shadow over all his subsequent relationships. The realization that love, even the most ardent and the most sincere, can given the correct assault, curdle into a mixture of pity and anger. So now see this, how love is moving towards suffering. And he says that ultimately he got one of the best realization of his lifetime from that relation, and that is that love then slowly and steadily turns into pity and anger. Pity and anger. Now, Paul will never tell us that he was ever angry on Susan. He would never tell us deliberately. Now, that is where perhaps he has hidden his anger, because he already has abused Gordon for anger. He already has told that Gordon is a bad person who is beating his wife out of anger and when he is drinking. So now he cannot tell that he also was becoming like Gordon, and he also was becoming very angry in the relation there. But he says obviously that what comes out from love is pity and anger. His love had gone, had been driven out month by month, year by year. But what shocked him was that the emotions which replaced it were just as violent as the love which had previously stood in his heart. And so his life and his heart were just as agitated as before, except that she was no longer able to assuage his heart. And that finally was when he had to hand her back. This hand her back. Finally, he has to hand her back as if like a thing. And now you are handing it back. That I used it, now you take back. Now I don't want this. He wrote a joint letter to Martha and Clara for that. So that is where the relation is ending after a decade between both of them. But he certainly never regretted his love for Susan. Later on, in the last part, he is thinking and is writing. But with all those things also, he says, I never regretted that relation as such with her. What he did regret was that he had been too young, too ignorant, too absolutist, too confident of what he imagined love's nature and workings to be. Now this is where that theme of love becomes significant. So he said with relation he don't have still any problem, or he is not like seeing that whether the relation might have gone anywhere in a wrong way, or it is like a regret or remorse. But what is remorseful is this, that in those days he was very young to understand the thing. And what is that? It is love's nature and working. પ્રેમ શું હોય, એ કામ કેમ કરે, અને કેવી એમની ડિમાન્ડો હોય પ્રેમની પણ, કેટલા બધા બલિદાનો આપવા પડે એની પાછળ, એ બધી સમજ નહોતી ત્યારે. અને એને લીધે આ બધું આખી સફરિંગ ઊભું થાય છે. એને લીધે આખું એક સફરિંગની હારમાં, અને then you are not able to sustain that. Would it have been better in the sense of less catastrophic for him, for her, for them both, if they had indeed had some French relationship? Now see, this is again a kind of a fantasy, that even the old man is thinking about. That is where Lacan becomes very important or significant also, to understand about that desire or the repression of desire. So maybe somewhere the old man is thinking that when he was going in relation with a rather old lady, it was not for love. It was not for love for that, but it was something else. It was maybe a kind of a sexual gratification. And what he wanted perhaps from that was something like a French relationship. Now this is this relations has unfolded in many films and many literature also. There is one popular novel also and became a film also, that is The Graduate. The Graduate. You can just note down this name. Later on, you can read about it. Quite a popular novel of around maybe 60s or 70s, and a Hollywood film also on that, The Graduate. And then there is a story about a young person who is just coming out of university, like Paul, who is coming out studying in university, and then had a relation with rather old women. Rather old women. Now, there in Graduate, it is the old women who seduces young person. It is the old women who is seducing young person. And as the story moves on, then later on, the young person is dating the daughter of that very person, and then falls in love with that person, and then like happily married in that. So Paul also is imagining that something like that should happen, that there is an old lady who would train me into my relation with other women and then let me go to have relation with younger people. That is that French relation. But that is not happening. That is not happening. So he just wanted an old lady for a relation for a while, where he gets ready to have a relation with younger person, and then the old lady let him go for that. That is the idea of French relationship. The older women teaching the younger men the arts of love, and then concealing an elegant tear, passing him out into the world of younger, more marriageable women. આવું થાય તો સારું. Maybe this was that desire of Paul when he was going in a relation. Now, obviously, this is a very selfish way of looking. આવી કોઈ વાત શરૂઆતમાં એણે કરી જ નહોતી કે આ રીતે આખા પ્રેમને જુએ છે, અથવા સુઝન સાથેના પ્રેમને એ આ રીતે જુએ છે. આ તો બહુ છેલ્લે આપણી સામે ખુલે છે કે એને તો આવી ઈચ્છા હતી, આવી કોઈ એક અનકોન્શિયસ ડિઝાયર એની અંદર હતું. So he said the older women teaching the younger men the arts of love, and then concealing an elegant tear. પછી એ થોડી દુઃખી થઈને પેલાને જવા દે, એમ પલ્લુમાં પોતાના આંસુ છુપાવી લે અને let go, rather than becoming obsessive that I won't allow you to have relation with anybody. Annie is coming in life of Paul, and when Annie called to at the home, there was landline phone, and once when obviously this lady Suzanne is picking up a phone, there might be some bad talk between both of them, and because of which Annie falls out of relation with Paul. So that also, which is not told us in detail, that what actually might have happened, but we can connect the things that he perhaps wanted Suzanne to play that role where she allows him to have relation with another younger marriageable women rather than only with her, perhaps. But neither he nor Suzanne had been sophisticated enough for that, because he was too young to understand. She was rather old, she can understand, but she won't allow perhaps that to happen in that relation also. He remembered his own early attempts to define love back in the village. These are last part of the novel, third part, when he looks back at his diary. He says earlier one, when he was trying to define love, when he was alone in his bed, and love he had ventured was like the vast and sudden uncreasing of lifelong frown. Love as the end of a migraine, no worse, love as buttocks. His other comparison, love feeling as if the lungs of the soul had suddenly been inflated with pure oxygen. Love as barely legal drug use. Did he have any idea what he had been talking about? So all this thing he imagined, that what happens when you have love, and love is all these kinds of a thing that he used to imagine in on all those years. He took his little notebook from the desk drawer. Now an old fellow, 70 years old. He again gets the diary. He hadn't written anything new in it for a long time. At one point, frustrated by how few good definitions of love he could find, he started copying down at the back all the bad definitions. So he's looking at his diary and he's seeing that lots of things he has written, definitions of love. And when he is not able to find a good definition of love, whatever came across, he copied down. And he thought that I will strike through, I will cross it off when I will think that this is not a right definition. That was his way of maintaining diary. Love is this, love is that, love means this, love means that. Even quite well-known formulations said little more than, in effect, it's a soft toy, it's a puppy dog, It's a whoopee cushion. Love means never having to say you are sorry. Now this is what our cinematic dialogue will say. No sorry, no thank you in love. Like Maine Pyar Kiya film was trying to say that no sorry, no thank you when you love and those kinds of things. So he says that love means never having to say sorry. On the contrary, on the contrary, it frequently means doing just precisely that. પ્રેમમાં હો ત્યારે દિવસમાં 10 વખત I am sorry કહેવું પડે. આના કરતા સાવ ઉલટું, જેમ લોકો કે પ્રેમમાં સોરી ન કહેવું પડે, આમાં 10 વખત તમારે આ જ કહેવું પડે. Contrary, frequently means doing just precisely that. Then there was all those love lines from all those love songs, filmy ગીતો બધા, with the swooning delusions of lyricists, singers, bands, and other thing. Even the bittersweet ones and the cynical ones, always true to you, darling in my fashion, struck him as the mere counterfactuals of sentimentality. So all this thing that he thought, written in the diary about love, was nothing but sentimentality. એકદમ છીછરા પ્રકારના લાગણીના આવેગોથી જે વાત થતી હોય એ બધા સિવાય કશું આજે એને એમાં દેખાતું નથી. His own notebook when he's referring in search of definition of love. And then final part, final way of looking at love, final way of looking that what is that ultimately the writer gives us, that what is love ultimately then. So he says that here was an entry in that notebook, a very serious one, which he hadn't crossed out in years. He wouldn't remember where it came from. He never recorded the writer or the source. He didn't want to be bullied by reputation. Truth should be stand by itself, clear and unsupported. This one went, in my opinion, this is what finally in the theme of love or suffering and passion says, in my opinion, every love, happy or unhappy, so that idea about suffering goes with the idea of love, unhappy, is a real disaster, is a real disaster once you give yourself over to it entirely. Yes, that deserves to stay. He liked the proper inclusivity of happy or unhappy. But the key was, but very important one was, once you give yourself entirely to it, સંપૂર્ણપણે તમે જ્યારે એને તાબે થઈ જાઓ ત્યારે, then there is a kind of a disaster in love. That is the truth of love, that it leads to a kind of a disaster. It can be a happy disaster or an unhappy disaster, but disaster ultimately when you give entirely yourself to that. Despite appearances, this wasn't pessimistic, nor was it bittersweet. This was the truth about love spoken by someone in the full vortex of it, and which seemed to enclose all of life's sadness also. So this is ultimately coming out as a debate of love, with all those turns and twists from younger days to older days, where suddenly he comes is this point, that it is life's sadness that normally gets reflected as an outcome of love, and it's a kind of a disaster that finally stands with him at the end of the story there. So now in this, these are all quotes, all the debates and discussions that goes about around love in the novel. Now, as we have discussed earlier, we know that this is more of philosophical brooding rather than story. So many quotes we have seen, and so many still there are. And all these things are not talking about any events happening in the story. So the novel is more about philosophical broodings rather than about telling what is happening. What is happening, that is in very few pages. But brooding on that, thinking on that is too much. So it's a kind of a philosophical novel that we see there. Now, when we read these relations, and briefly we have touched upon this idea also, which obviously comes from Lacan's idea about looking at repression of desire, and that's what he says. So he obviously says that we all are subject of desire. Every human beings are having a kind of an unconscious desire. Now there is a difference between wish and desire. Wish is conscious. You are aware about what you wish for. But desires are unconscious. We are not aware about our desires. That is why it is very much psychological. It is very much unknowingly controlling our behavior, our desires, unknowingly controls our behavior. And we, in a way, perhaps we do not have a control over what we are doing when we are pursuing our desires. That is why it is unconscious. That is why sometimes that floating log, wooden log in Mississippi, is a metaphor for that. That anybody who is unconsciously driven. So whether Paul is unconsciously driven towards Susan, Susan also is the similar way driven towards Paul, and what might be the thing? Possibly yes, they are driven by those unconscious desires. And in this discussion, we see that, well, we have big love stories. This also is a love story. Not as big as the stories of Romeo and Juliet, Dido and Aeneas, Antony and Cleopatra, Tristan and Isolde, Lancelot and Guinevere, Romeo and Juliet, Anna Karenina, Gone with the Wind, Casablanca, Brief Encounter, Western classical films. Gone with the Wind also is a popular film. Casablanca also is a film based on literature. But talking about great love stories, which gets connected with Romeo, Juliet, or Hir Ranza, Soni Mahiwal kind of a narrative there. So the question that is there, that why we have all these things and they become legendary when so many are forgotten and tend to be the ones with unhappy endings. Why these unhappy ending stories are told again and again. This is again the same. This also goes into the archetypes of all those stories where there is an unhappy ending that meets there. Why do we remember them? Or why do we keep on telling those stories again? Why Julian Barnes tells one more story? We already have so many stories like this. Why again one more here? Why have some of the oldest ones been recycled so many times in opera, in novels, in films, and other things also? Lacan would give a kind of a justification that we all have in this discussion as it moves on. It tries to explain in detail. There are 4 or 5 slides of this. Very briefly we will talk about that. You can later on refer to the slides to read and prepare your answers and other things also are there. So in a way it says that when we are born, we are without language. We are born without language. And we want to articulate all our dreams and desires in that state. But then what happens is that we have to deal with language. We have to always deal with language. We are in a process of learning language. And then we realize that the language is incapable of telling what I want to tell. So a kind of a repression starts happening. As soon as we learn language, what happens is repression of our dreams and desires. Because what we actually want, we can't tell. When we are without language, we are happy, we can laugh. We are unhappy, we can cry. And people around us will try to understand why we are crying. Are we hungry? Do we have any problem? That is the problem of other people, not ours. We are in a cradle. આપણે ઘોડિયામાં સૂતા આપણે ભેંકડો તાણવાનો, આપણે રડવાનું, આજુબાજુ વાળા સમજે કે શું કામ રડે છે, એ એનો પ્રશ્ન છે, આપણો પ્રશ્ન જ નથી. આપણને આનંદ આવે ત્યારે આપણે પગ ઉલાળવા માંડીએ, ગોથા ખાવા માંડીએ, હસી લઈએ, whatever we want to do, we are free to do. But as soon as we learn language, we can't do that. Then if you will laugh, people will say, why are you laughing? Or you will cry, people will say, why are you crying? Now you don't want to speak that. You don't want, because it doesn't have a language. But you have to articulate yourself in a language only. And then repression starts building. That repression starts building. Now in that there is, it says that a kind of a gap is created. A kind of a gap is created. And there is that otherness, the otherness of this being. It starts getting internalized us. And in that gap, we slowly and steadily, in that gap, a desire is born. In that gap, a repression, and in that repression, there is a desire that is born. And with that gap and with that desire, if it goes on extending too much or repression being suppressed too much, then living becomes unbearable. And then maybe we may go mad also someday because of that, because of those repressions and other things. If we are not able to articulate ourselves in a proper way, which language obviously will deny us that thing, then we may go mad in those things also. Then this, what we have to do for this is that The desire which is unconscious, most of us find a succession of that in love objects. So we need to give outlet to that repression and that desire in any form, in some form of love objects. And fasten our desire unto them. We have to fasten our desires unto them, and by pursuing our love objects, we have to give an outlet to our repression. Now, if that doesn't happen, then the easy outcome is going towards mental issues, or a kind of a life which is unbearable, like maybe that is happening to Susan also, ultimately becoming alcoholic, and then dementia from which she is suffering, and becomes a patient of a mental asylum also. Maybe she wanted to speak something, she is in search of some love objects, but then she is not able to ultimately anchor herself with any of those love objects, be it Gerald or the husband Gordon, or then later on in the life Paul, who is coming in the life. Or maybe all this thing is happening because of some kind of damage, which was done when she was of 12, 13, 14 years, and that was by Uncle Humphrey. Uncle Humphrey, with whom she has undergone a kind of a child abuse, the relation there, and maybe that damage has grown without knowledge in herself as that big other, or the real other, or a kind of a repression, or a kind of a desire, but it never found any proper outlet. And then she went in search of some form of love objects, one or the other. But then maybe none of those men also were perhaps able to understand this, and she was not having language to speak of that. She was not having language. That is why Lacan, when he begins that when we are in a language-less state, we are more freer being. We are more freer. But as soon as we enter into the process of learning language, we are no longer a freer being. We become subject of something, and then we are subjugated by that language. We have to articulate ourselves in a language only. And as we discussed earlier also, when we were talking about Susan's character, that child abuse is something that we don't have a language, though obviously now we are giving language to the kids. In the schools now, people are teaching about bad touch and good touch, and they say that these are bad touches, and if this kind of bad touches happen, then you have to complain to your parents or to teachers, and this kind of bad touches maybe from anybody who is a teacher, who is a peon, who is a driver, or any family members also, and from them also that language we are giving now as a part of education. But well, back then or in many spaces still the language is not given. Maybe that is the reason that Suzanne remains a very enigmatic character in the entire novel also. Or this rift, to heal the rift between the subject and the lost real. In the end, they can't, though of course it's possible to have a good time in the process of finding them out. So in between you may find a good time in a process, but ultimately it is going to fall apart. It is not ultimately going to find that self there. So this love object idea, as we said, that it can be an individual, or it can be a thing, it can be a cause, it can be anything. It can be some kind of success, some kind of goals in life, some kind of achievements in life. Anything can be love objects. The problem is that when the love object is human being, there is always a problem, because the other human being also is coming with some kind of loss, is also coming with some kind of gap which that other human beings also want to fill. So if we are moving towards another human being to fill our gap, then other being also is moving to fill that gap. Now if બંને ચોકઠાઓ જો બરાબર ગોઠવાઈ જાય તો એ સંબંધ સારો ચાલે. બંને ચોકઠાઓ એમને જે ઉણપ છે અને આમની ઉણપ જુદી છે અને બંને ફિક્સ થાય છે એકબીજાની, then it is good. પણ એ બંને ટકરાય તો એ સંઘર્ષ ઉભો થાય. So that is, and that's why we see in human relations, we find that we can't be good friends with everybody also. With somebody we can be good friends. So then there is perhaps, we all are finding the gaps, and that gaps are adjusting well into that, and so that jigsaw puzzle is fixing it well, and it gives a good relation out of that. But if it will not be, then the jigsaw puzzle will not fix well, and then there will be some kind of problems there. So that is how we can study all human relations. In that we can say that it is not possible that everybody will have a good relations with everybody in society. But the easy solution from this is this, that if people put or use this idea of love objects as something or some cause or some other kind of achievements, then those things, those causes, those achievements, they do not have their own desires. So they will not demand something from us. So it is in our control, whereas humans are not in our own control. They have their own desires also, so they will work in that way, whereas things or non-being things will be separate. So sometimes people dedicate, or they find causes in this also, and then they dedicate their life for that also is a love object, and then it can be a happy life in that way also. So far they live, they can have the happiness also. But when we think of other human for this, we have to be ready for suffering whenever we think of other being. So whenever we look at this other being in this, which Paul is looking for, or maybe Suzanne also is looking for, then it is going to be towards suffering. This is going to be a kind of a reality in any human relations that is going to be unfolded there. And we know that we can't live without human beings. We are humans and we live with humans. Many times when people are people find some kind of these things with pet animals also. Many times with pet animals, with other things also, and animals also not as demanding as human beings. So we have lot many those pets also that people keep, and that also is the same thing. It is the same thing, that rather than a human, it is better to live with pets. And pets are not demanding us; they will do whatever you want. Whereas humans will not do that and will come in conflict. So like the culture of pets in our societies also is somewhere an outcome of this only. Or we can understand the culture of pet also with the same kind of things also. So Suzanne perhaps instead of keeping Paul would have kept a Pomeranian dog. Then perhaps her life might be better rather than going for Paul to find some kind of filling of the gap. Had she kept some pets, in terms of like John is keeping pets. John has a pet, a dog. So she is more happy now. But Susan is going for Paul. And Paul cannot be a pet. Paul will not become a Pomeranian dog. But well, everybody wants Pomeranian dogs. That whenever you want, you can cuddle. Whenever you want, you can scold. Whenever you want, you can kick. Whenever you want, you can put it in your lap. Well, but with humans, it is not possible. With dogs, it is. With cats, it is. And John has found a better solution rather than Susan. Susan ends in mental asylum. John happily dies. John ultimately happily dies with the pet animal also. So this and final, there are still a couple of slides there in this very long presentation on this theme of love and passion and suffering. Moving towards conclusion, that to understand this point of a dream desire, there is one very interesting other point apart from John and Susan's character, and there is some very curious dream sequence in the novel, where and this is revisited couple of times. Paul imagines that Susan has gone upstairs and she is hanging down somewhere, and suddenly Paul goes and extends the hands and she is hanging. Clutching his wrist. His wrist is caught and she is hanging there. And then suddenly the tooth, she has done a kind of a surgery of the tooth plate. It is falling down, it is breaking down. And then what happens? We don't know. And then second time he visits, he finds that it is Susan has fallen down. And then third time when he visits, he finds that he also has fallen down. It is he who has suffered the damage of that also. So this dream sequence also tries to tell that initially he thinks that this Susan who is hanging around or hanging at the wrist or the hand of Paul is something looking for a support, for a life. But then ultimately it turns out that this entire thing became more damaging to Paul himself also. And somewhere things went wrong in such a way that Paul thought that he is damaged by that. And Suzanne is somebody who has damaged his life. So he is not openly accepting, because he keeps on telling that, well, I loved Suzanne. But well, there was something that one that he left her, and he is looking for excuses that she is alcoholic, she is liar, she is patient of dementia, all those things. But maybe somewhere he has started thinking that I have destroyed my life because of my relation with Susan also. That one can see there. So an image comes into your head one day, an image, your relationship to one another. You are at an upstairs window at the house of Henry Road. She has somehow climbed out and you are hanging onto her by the wrists, of course, kind of a thing there. So this is revisited, and then the last part he says damage limitation. In this he says that, and perhaps the truth was that she had pulled him out with her weight. She had pulled him out with her weight, and he had fallen too and been grievously damaged in the process. And been grievously damaged in the process. This is what it says, that when you go for a love object who is a human being, you also will be damaged in that process. That is also a kind of an understanding which this writer is giving to us in this context here in the study, that love is more about suffering. This is a passion. Love is a kind of a passion, and the passion is a word which is having the root of suffering in it. Though we have forgotten that passion has nothing to do with suffering, but it is very much about suffering. So if love is the passion, then love also comes with suffering. And so again we come back to the beginning of the novel at the end to understand that what was that initial question, and that is exactly what is the major concern, that would you rather love the more and suffer the more, or love the less and suffer the less? That is, I think, finally the only real question. That is how the understanding of love is given here, that are you ready to suffer or not? Then only think of loving. If you want to save yourself, better stay away from the love. Love is always with suffering. That is how this novel is looking at the idea. So as a postmodernist narrative, it is breaking the very meta narrative of love. Love is something good, love is something great, and there are great stories told about love and duty, love and sacrifice, lot many things. This novel is breaking all those narratives and gives a different dynamics about love and suffering here. Any questions if you have? Okay, so then otherwise we end this class here.